So this kind of rustled my jimmies a little bit because I've studied Eastern philosophy for about 10 years or so, pretty intensively. Although most of Eastern philosophy is not so much about scholarship, I think it has similarity in that sense with Christianity, wherein someone who just
All
studies.
desires are bad.
Oh, why does that happen every time? That's sneaky. How the hell did that happen? Oh, I pressed on play. Okay.
Even good desire.
Yeah. Okay. So, so yeah. So I think that's similar in Christianity. Whereas if someone would just read the Bible but wouldn't pray, wouldn't meditate on God, wouldn't go out to teach people or pray with people or go to church, he would not be seen as a very great Christian, you know. And also historically, that was not how it was taught. Unless you live very, very simply in a monastery, then you could live that way, where you are more inward focused. But try to make Carl's face look a little bit better here. But yeah, I quite respect these men. I have seen him in the scene with Andrew Wilson, who I respect. I haven't actually seen a lot of him at all, but I respect just what they're doing. From what I've seen, I respect him. I really like his videos also, so it's not a dunk on these guys. I wrote also a little comment if they want to debate me, that would be interesting on this. Or just, to me, it's not so much about winning a debate on the issue, because I don't think there's really much of a fundamental difference. But there were some things said here that I just don't... I kind of know to be untrue, because he's not so learned on the issue, but he was asked to talk on this. But it's still okay, but just not really great, so...
How would you go about refuting the Eastern religions? I mean, there is a lot of them. Is there like a general overarching errors of them with, like Taoism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism? Because there are some similarities that, at least my perception is, there's kind of like a incoherent metaphysics, maybe a little bit of a Gnostic view of like our desires in nature, and they embrace reincarnation, so we have lots of chances. So how would you go about the general problem with the religions, and then maybe the more specific problems with each one?
I would say, in a way, Taoism, Hinduism, and Buddhism are, in a way, three different paradigms. So, beginning with the older one, Hinduism, it is polytheistic. Some would say it's monotheistic in regards to the ultimate overarching presence of Brahma. It is a belief in the soul, which is going to be a differentiation with Buddhism. That was what...
So that is not true, I would say. I mean, it's a little bit of a tricky subject, so I'm not like hammering on the guy, but what he says here is true. It's Hinduism is a polytheistic religion in some sense, but more of a monotheistic religion. Although they're also just kind of pretty similar in the sense that the soul could be seen as sort of the Holy Spirit, although in maybe a less sophisticated manner than Christianity has. And the soul is one with God, and so the Holy Spirit is one with God. Now, does that mean that we are all God? Well, I wouldn't say that either. We're all part of God, but in the human form there is obviously a lot of limitation, and that is supposed to be there, that will not go away. So what he says here is true, but then he says that in Buddhism there is no soul. But that is not really what the Buddha thought. The Buddha was just a sect of Hinduism, a more meditative sect, or a more sort of ascetic sect. I mean, it was significant. The role he has now in Asia is very big. There's statues everywhere. And the change that he made sort of is significant in the sense that he taught more morality, and actually just morality and meditation in a kind of a wholesome or holistic structure. So you have the 8 rules of life, basically. You need to follow these, and then you can meditate and sort of reach divinity, or realize divinity, or experience divinity, and then that's it, basically. And even if you practice very well and you kind of reach that more and more, or you kind of reach, you can also kind of let go of all these nitty gritty teachings. But I mean, I don't really blame him for saying that he teaches that there is no soul. That is the general understanding in the West, that there is no soul, sort of. But this is just one interpretation of the teaching. The Buddha like really much emphasized that the body is not ultimately the self, the mind is not ultimately the self. And so I don't know too much about the academic details. That I could look these up, but I have been in Buddhism for 10 years. I've lived in monasteries, I've practiced a lot, I've read books. The details you might need to want to look up anyway if you want to be really strict. But he didn't really go around saying there is no soul, because there is reincarnation. And one might think, well, that ends after having realized this deeper state of consciousness. But that points to the fact that this deeper state, this state of consciousness, like, which is the peace or the space or the light, you could say, that is already beyond the world. So the soul is already beyond the world. And so that does not reincarnate. But the body obviously regenerates, kind of gets torn down a little bit, and then also, we would say, in a bigger scheme, even though I consider myself Christian or a universalist Christian, I still believe in reincarnation for this reason. That yes, there is liberation in the Holy Spirit, yes, there is liberation in the soul, but the body still reincarnates. Even now, even when you don't die, it sort of changes. And then when you die, yes, you can experience heaven or a kind of hellish state, and after that still you will be reborn. That's just what we believe. And then paradoxically, you have to understand this from a sort of meditative spiritual point of view, is that you also don't reincarnate, because the peace of yourself, the sort of inner nothingness or light or being, the Holy Spirit, you could say, this is already transcendent, you can say, of this world. There is already peace in that world. Now that might be difficult to understand or hard to experience. I also think it's hard to experience when I'm living in the world sometimes. But in meditation or in prayer, you can experience that. So this question of, was Buddha right, was Jesus right, what's the ultimate, this will not get answered anyways in teaching or videos. This is only a matter of meditation. And I'm pretty sure that there are probably texts you can find in the Orthodox Saints or some such, wherein that is also said that you can't go around just reading the Bible, you have to meditate and pray to God. They have more of a meditative tradition. As Kyle pointed out in the beginning of the video, that's also an more Eastern sense of religion, which may be why we feel more of an attraction towards the Orthodox tradition, because it's also less mental. If you go to a Orthodox church, they just sing and kind of talk from the Bible directly and do the rituals, and that is the sort of meditative space that they have. It's not about the mental discussion, which is good, I think.
A differentiation with Buddhism. That was what Siddhartha Gautama was really noted for, is that he believed that the world was all suffering, that desire led to suffering. This is part of
so
the course.
This is also just one interpretation or one translation that is not really correct, I would say. Now again, I like his work and all that, it's not a hammering on him, but so he said the world is all suffering. He kind of did teach that, and he kind of did also not teach that. That is just one interpretation of that. Yes, the sensations and such can be seen as all suffering, but even suffering is not the best translation. Many of us would say, we would say that dissatisfaction is the more accurate. But there's also things that kind of refute that, in the sense that you can have very happy states or and such. But if you go around, and this is the same in Christianity, like chasing objects and only food and all that, that doesn't really satisfy. You won't get peace from that. Christians have the same thing. That comes more from prayer and being a good person and such. And that's just the same in Buddhism. So, yeah.
He believed that the world was all suffering.
So that is sort of still true. The world as its manifestation is all suffering, but what Westerners translate poorly is that life then becomes all suffering. But that is not what the Buddha thought. That's really just not what he thought. He taught happiness and peace. Now, were there difficult times and such where he spoke with people maybe when you can say that life is suffering? Yes, if you define life also as more this manifestation part of it, then yes, you can say that is suffering, but it's also happiness. So this is why I guess the Buddha also said you have to practice and then use the teaching as a raft to cross this ocean of birth and death. So, and then you can find peace, and then you can kind of let go of the teaching, because you won't. Like, will you ever experience a really deep meditation or profound prayer or a profound church meeting or any of these things by just pondering, you banging your head against the computer on YouTube? No, you won't. So, yeah.
That desire led to suffering. This is part of the
desire led to suffering. Again, this is true, but not really. We mostly say, or more learned Buddhists would say, no, it's craving is a better word. You really want this, you want that, or that feeling of unsatisfactory, of seeking, of needing to have things. That should be as let go of as much as possible. I think you can also translate or see it in the Bible as covetous, people who are jealous. It's a similar idea.
Four Noble Truths and then the Eightfold Path is that you have to eliminate your desire, realize that there is
eliminate craving. That would be more accurate, because there are states of wholesome desire. Wholesome desire is mentioned in Buddhism.
no soul. And
there is a soul, otherwise you can't have reincarnation.
We believe the soul to be is the collection of negative karma.
That's also nowhere mentioned in the Buddhist text. The negative, you can say maybe the unenlightened soul or the mind. Well, that's just not mentioned in any Buddhist text. You would have to show me that. I don't think there is. But you can say the sort of attached soul, the attached mind that has a lot of these cravings and defilements, which we say are sin, or which Christians have as sins. Then, or I'm also a Christian. I define myself as such, but I also believe in the Jesus story. Ultimately, I define myself as a universalist Christian in the world, as a person. And I do believe that all these things are true, and I have my reasons for it. I don't think it really also matters whether you can say someone is a Christian or not. It has to be seen in their behavior. And I personally, what I find to be the distinction is whether someone sins or doesn't sin. And there are some basic sins and some more subtle sins, but that is my distinction. Or whether someone is Christian or Christ-like, or just a follower of Christ. And yes, I would say, and no, I wouldn't say that I'm like a perfect Christian. It's kind of hard to, you know, you can always do more. You might never be as good as Jesus lived, you know. So that's why I have the distinction of, are you more sinful or are you not sinful?
And this is why then you are presently in the lifetime that you are, and that enlightenment was offered to anybody in this life. This was very different from Hinduism, which had a strict caste system, which was much more ritualistic. And
Alright, so he was more talking about Hinduism. And there was a caste system. I don't think this was not in the original Bhagavad Gita, or this is not in the Bhagavad Gita. This is something more modern. But there were and also the farmers, I think, should be with the laborers. But there were traders and merchants, farmers and workers, warriors, and sort of guards and rulers or so. And then you have priests and teachers. But these are just the sort of bodies of the god, or bodies of different parts of God. Don't know when Dalit was invented, but maybe it refers more to criminals or such. But yeah, that's obviously tragic. But they still believe everyone is God. They still believe in the Holy Spirit, you can say. So the Western interpretation, honestly, is not often very, very fair. But okay.
Sense of the way that the Vedas, the Rig Veda, then moving into the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, much more philosophical texts. But these are later developments in the history of Hinduism. And so Hinduism believes in a soul, and that we then can become enlightened and attain moksha. Moksha is released from the cycle of samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth, of reincarnation. And that if you were born a woman, for example, now this is changed in some aspects of Hinduism, but historically, then this wasn't your lifetime to attain enlightenment. That there's
So I don't know to what degree that's true. It is true that men universally have a different role, that of the not of the housekeeper, but of the worker, the person in politics, the person doing the work, and the women stay at home and take care of the children, or work more from home. That's also safer and such, and more physically taxing. So, as also Andrew Wilson talks about that a lot. So this may or may not be sort of true. I don't know.
historically, then this wasn't your
Because also Krishna is in the heart of all beings, and therefore it's like therefore you can't really say that women are not part of God or are less than God. There may be men who have said that, or sects who say that, but that is not really, I think, a really fair representation.
lifetime to attain enlightenment. That there's a general expectation where it's a man, usually he would have a family, and once the children went off to educate, university, I mean, even though that's not historical necessarily, but they got a job. Basically, the children were able to have their own families. Then the head householder, he could then become an ascetic and renounce the world, renounce his family, renounces his belongings, and then he can move on the path towards enlightenment. So Hinduism is really just a collection of different worldviews, venerative practices. So you have Shaivism of people who believe Shiva is the ultimate god, people that believe Vishnu is the ultimate.
So I guess in their society you also have more sophisticated, non-sophisticated people who really worship the different forms. It is a central theme in Hinduism that God is the unmanifest, the formless, divine presence or consciousness that is beyond the world. So, and he isn't saying anything wrong here, just pointing that out.
God, Vaishnavism, you have all, Shaktism, that Shakti is the ultimate
I would agree that
God.
They don't really have a strong unifying philosophy, and that could be a critique. I would agree with that.
And so you have all these devotional cults in Hinduism, and what they believe can certainly differ. They have, the right-hand path and the left-handed path, which is considered the...
And also, I think I'm more of a fan of Buddhism and Christianity, and I do think that these societies also have been shown to be more well off than the sort of India state, though history and politics are also a bit complicated there, but I would say that.
Tantric tradition. So when we look at a deity like Kali, which is a female goddess, which is the tantric version of Shiva's wife, where she now becomes a sort of dominant aggressor. She has a garland of male heads. She stands on top of her chest. The chest of her.
I think usually they interpret it as someone, the goddess who kills demons, but I'm sure it gets misused all the time.
Her husband, she's getting ready to kill him, and so it's like this veneration of unconstrained female energy, and it has a very erotic and sexual bent to it. And I even did a quick video comparing Kali to forms of Western feminism, but I digress there. My point being that Hinduism is, I would say, very different from Taoism. Buddhism, and the Buddha himself has been appropriated by forms of Hinduism, so they have devotional cults within Hinduism that like venerate the Buddha. But Buddhism itself, you have Theravada, Mahayana, and then Vajrayana, which is the Tibetan form, and that's the more mystical form, and they believe in deities. So that's where there are a lot of nuance has to be used when talking about Buddhism or Eastern traditions, because even within the schools of Buddhism, people will say, well, Buddhism is an atheistic tradition. Well, true. If you're...
Well, no, it's not. This is actually something that I would have to do a little bit more research on. But did Buddha believe in Brahman? Buddhism denies Brahman. I'm not sure if that's true. A lot of what people say about Buddhism online is kind of sketchy. So emptiness, voidness, and anatta nonsense. Well, and then so this is a bit, the weirdness here. It says Buddhism denies both Brahma and Atman concepts in Hindu literature. I mean, in Hindu literature, okay, but then again, they do use the word again to mean best or supreme. So they do believe in Brahma, but I would kind of get behind this in the sense that if you go into deep meditation, there isn't really you go for peace, and you don't really focus on the dreams or weird experiences. You go for peace, or basically just peace. And yeah, so which can give kind of sort of good energies or feeling good about that, but which is the same as Christianity and prayer in that sense. But so they do have the word Brahman, but then they say it has nothing to do with that kind of God. So that's sort of Western interpretation that Buddhism is an atheist religion, and many people they don't believe in they believe that Buddhism is an atheistic religion, but that's just not really true.
You're especially talking about like Zen Buddhism in Japan or stuff like that. But if you get into Tibet, that is very much believes in various gods and deities that they perform rituals to, and that can help them attain various goals in the world. So from an Orthodox perspective, Taoism is much closer to our worldview. And in fact, I have the book right here, Christ the Eternal Tao by Hiram Athasine, which talks about how Taoism, so how Taoism is sort of it's the closest you could get to a concept of logos in the world from naturalistic theology, just from the pure observation of nature. And so Taoism believes in a heaven and ways of hell. It believes that the Tao is uniting all things, that again, the yin and yang, opposites, energies, these things are present within creation. So myself, I was much more geared towards Taoism and forms of Buddhism when I was very much interested in East Asian stuff. And so the biggest, if you're going to critique those paradigms, you could critique in regards to the lack of a soul, and both Hinduism and Buddhism believe in Maya, that the physical world is a false representation. It's an illusion. That's how Maya translates in the Sanskrit. So one could then ask them to, how do you come to ultimate knowledge claims if the world which you're observing itself is illusionary? And so they would have to appeal to probably some type of personal revelation, for example, that of the Buddha, or the revelation of the Vedas. But typical Hinduism now is not Vedic oriented. That was the Aryan form that sort of built the basis for what is Indian religion. But epistemology is a good one. Concepts of the soul, so those are different depending on which tradition you're talking to. The overall cohesiveness of the worldview, I think that there's multiple holes one could poke through in regards from an Orthodox perspective, but that often depends on who you're in conversation with, because most people don't even understand a transcendental argument or what you're talking about when you're talking about philosophical presuppositions.
Yeah, exactly. Transcendental arguments, the impossibility of the contrary. If your worldview, you can never have knowledge because everything is an illusion, then your worldview is self-refuting. There's no way.
Exactly.
There's no.
It'd be like arguing for relativism and being emphatic that there is no objective truth.
So I think that's interesting. I think it's just kind of an interpretation of things. I do think that there are sort of problems that people can run into when they take that stuff too literally, because the sort of problems that we often have in the West is that, or that you can have in the West, is that people just pick and choose from whatever religion and don't really follow anything, or don't have a traditional basis or a good understanding of these things. So they just fling at ideas and then, oh, that's the truth, that's the truth, that's the truth. when that's not really a natural way of living. If you study religion, you do it with a group of people, you study text, you talk and such, instead of this sort of do it yourself or do it on your own. Then you can run into people who might be sort of a bit wacky and say, well, no, it's just all an illusion, man, it doesn't matter. And then when, they hit their toe against something, they curse very hardly, and then it's a big drama. So it's like you can use it for immorality, and if you yeah, basically. But I don't know, here they have the argument that if the world is an illusion, you can't really have a sort of opinion on it, but you can when you see it as, well, there's still the soul, or the sort of that you can have. But I also mentioned that. So I mean, I think I'll end it here. It goes on into a lot, and I've basically said what I want to say. I can leave the original video for them. If he wants to debate me on this, I'm not sure if there's really much to debate on, but talk on could be a possibility. But that's one thing I wanted to clarify on Buddhism. Maybe I'll add something others, but thank you for listening, and God bless you.